Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video, I'm bringing to you 10 underrated or underhyped book recommendations. I'm saying these as both underhyped or underrated because I personally think not enough people read these books for how good they are. At the same time, the average ratings for most of these books in Goodreads is not as high as I thought them to be. I have books from a variety of genres and I'm sure that if you read these 10 books, you'll not be disappointed at all and you'll also end up recommending them to other people. So without any further ado, let's get into the books right away. The first book that I'm recommending today is the book which actually inspired me to make this video, and it is also a very recent read of mine, and it is Breasts and Eggs by Miyako Kawakami. That is a literary fiction translated from Japanese into English, and here we follow our main character Natsuko, who's a writer and she's living in Tokyo. She is visited by her elder sister and her niece during one particular year, and her elder sister wants to get a breast enlargement surgery because she is facing some issues with her body and how she wants it to look like. The first 1/4 or 1/3 of the book deals with the story with her sister and her niece for Natsuko. And after that, we fast forward 10 years in the future. And at that point, we see that Natsuko is a published author and she is working on her second book right now. During this time, only Natsuko also gets to know that she is a person who's not interested in having any kind of romantic relationship in her life. At the same time, intimacy of any kind seems a bit too painful for her. She also wants to have a baby, but she can understand that she does not want to get married to a man. So she's looking out for sperm donors and she's trying to get pregnant on her own. And all the discussions that are surrounding this particular topic in her life is the actual plot of this book. Despite dealing with these two important aspects inside the story, it also has so much social commentary going on. Having said all these things, it is not that much of a serious book if you ask me. It is very conversational in its tone, even though the things that it is dealing with are super serious in their aspect. I personally think that women who read this book will feel a lot more understood and relatable. At the same time, men who read this book can understand how much more it is difficult to be a woman in any world, no matter what culture they are a part of. This book definitely blew my mind and I rated it 5 stars, and the rating for this one was less than 4 stars on Goodreads, and that's why I want all of you to go forward and try this. It's quite a big book, so it will take a little bit of your time to read, but trust me, it will be completely worth it. The next one is a mythological retelling, and it is Sita's Sister by Kavita Kani. That is a retelling of the Ramayana, but from the point of view of Urmila, who's the younger sister of Sita. I have read a few other retellings of Ramayana before, but trust me, I have not seen something that is very different in its point of view as this one was before. Here we see the story from the point of Urmila, just as I said before, but it is not always from her point of view alone. We get the story narrated to us as such, the original story that we know. At the same time, we also see how much important Urmila has been for the Ramayana to go in the direction that it went in, and what all she has done in order to keep the kingdom together in the absence of her sister, her husband, and her sister's husband. This book clearly shows how much Urmila is foreseen as a character and not that much shown to us in any kind of adaptation of the Ramayana so far, and how much it is necessary to portray her as she is properly to us, because after reading this book, you can clearly see and understand that the Ramayana could not have gone in the trajectory that it has gone if not for the things that have been done by Urmila in order to keep the kingdom as well as the family together, and how much necessary she was to keep the peace intact inside the kingdom despite all these things going on around. It is quite a short book. You can finish this in just a couple of days itself, so please do give it a try. The next one is a YA fantasy that is based on Hindu mythology and lore, and it is Star Daughter by Shweta Thakrar. I know that this book is comparatively more popular than most of the other books that I'm going to talk about in this list, but the reason why I'm including this here is because I think the book was not well received during the time it was published, because it was not properly marketed to the audience. It was just marketed as a Hindu mythology inspired fantasy, and that just bumps up the expectations and makes us think that it is a high fantasy when it is not. Here we deal with the story of Sheetal, who's half star, half human being, and she has been brought up by her father on Earth. Her mother is a star and she had to get back to Svargalok just a few years after Sheetal was born because of some reasons. And close to when Sheetal is about to turn 17 or 16, what happens is she accidentally ends up hurting her father. And in order to bring out his recovery, she has to go forward and bring real star blood from Svargalok. So she goes along with one of her friends to Svargalok and she tries to bring the star blood back to Earth in order to save her father. This is the simple plot of the book. And while you read this book, please do keep in mind that it is a very low stakes book and it is such a comfortable, cozy fantasy book. I've also seen a video in which the author says that she has written it based on the knowledge that she has as an Indian who lives in the US. And you can clearly see it while reading the story also that the author does not try to make us believe that she knows everything that she's talking about. And she does not try to just push certain things just because it is a Hindu-inspired fantasy. It is very soft and cozy in its tone. And it is also such a sweet story. So you need to try this one. The next one is a non-fiction book. And trust me, if you're a book lover or if you're someone who likes to see the beauty in words, or if you're someone who enjoys the small little pleasures of life, you need to try this book. And it is The Clothing of Books by Jhumpa Lahiri. This book is literally 65 pages long and it is such a tiny book, okay? If you're a speed reader, you'll easily finish reading this book in under an hour itself. I relished this book and slowly read it, okay? It took me over 2 hours to finish reading it. And trust me, all those minutes that I spent reading this book are completely worth it. In this book, the author basically talks about book covers and how much less an authority an author has over deciding the covers of their own books. It is kind of like the plight of an author when it comes to showing their story and putting a face on their story in the form of a cover. At the same time, it is something which is very, very tiny but can start a lot of conversations, especially inside the publishing world. I have highlighted and put in tabs at a lot of places in this book, despite it just being 65 pages long. Now, Jhumpa Lahiri has this knack for using words in the perfect way so that while you're reading that itself, you can just easily picture it in your mind. She has that beautiful talent and ability to bring words as pictures into your mind just like this. So if you're looking forward to something very, very short but super impressive, you need to try this one. And I personally think many more people, especially book lovers, need to read this one. The next one is a short story collection and it is also by one of the most popular authors of our time. At this point when I'm making this video and when you're watching it, this author is like a huge name when it comes to the publishing world, no matter where you are in the world. Despite that, this book is not being read by so many people, especially on the internet, and the rating for this one in Goodreads was criminally low in my personal opinion. And the book is Flight or Fright by Stephen King and Webb Vincent. Now this is a collection of 7 thriller short stories that happened during mid-flight, and some of the authors who are included inside this short story collection are Stephen King himself, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who's the author of the Sherlock Holmes series, Richard Matheson, who's the author of I Am Legend, and the movie I Am Legend starring Will Smith was based off that book. And the most surprising of all, Roald Dahl, who's super well known and loved for his children's books. Each and every one of the 17 short stories in this one is nail-bitingly good, and trust me, you'll not be able to put this book down at all because it will just get stuck to your hands and it will make you keep on flipping the pages continuously because it's such a well-curated collection. Now, I first thought that there are 17 short stories, so it might take a lot of time for me to get through this book. But trust me, once you start reading it, you'll not be able to keep it down at all. The next one is yet another non-fiction book, but this one is a self-help book and not just any non-fiction. And I cannot believe that this book has less than 2,000 ratings on Goodreads. And the average rating for this one is also far less than 4 stars. And the book is The Source by Dr. Tara Swart. I read this book last year and ever since I have not stopped talking about it at all because this book basically talks about visualization and it explains the power of visualization in the most biological, practical and scientific way possible. The author herself is a neuroscientist and she explains us the power of visualization and how it actually helps us do all the things that we want to do in our lives from a scientific standpoint and through a scientific approach throughout this book. Now, visualization is not something that is very easy to master and it is also just a skill that we all can develop very easily. It is not going to surface on the first try itself, but if we try to understand it better, get to know its nuances and practice them frequently, the art of visualization is something that can help you in multiple levels. I personally loved this book after I read it for the first time itself and I'm also planning to reread it pretty soon. Trust me guys, okay, this book is something which is a gold mine and not many people know it, and just saying that fact itself makes me feel so irritated. If you want to know more about this book as well as this author, just go forward and search Dr. Tara Swart on YouTube after you finish watching this video. Just seeing her talk about how visualization can be done in a very practical and biological way to change your life will instantly make you want to read this book. The next one is a YA contemporary book, but it also has some kind of magical realism elements into it. But trust me, the contemporary aspect of the book is the most important if you ask me, and it is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily Exart Pan, in which we follow our main character Lee, whose mother has committed suicide in the beginning of the book because of depression, and how Lee and her father are dealing to live their lives on their own without their mother in it. During this time, what also happens is this mysterious red bird comes into the life of Lee and that bird leads her to go to Taiwan, which is actually the birthplace of her mother. Her maternal grandparents are living in Taiwan right now, and Lee goes and spends a few days with her grandparents there, and while she is staying there, she also gets to know about the history of the mother's side of her family. Now this is one book which is super heavy in its tone, since it talks about depression and suicide and suicidal thoughts in detail. So if you're going to read this book, give yourself as much time as you want, because it will not be an easy read at all. It will be super heavy, but once you finish reading this and once you get through the book, you'll just understand how much necessary it is to provide all the support that we can to people who are depressed in our lives, and how we have to communicate our own problems with our loved ones if they arise in our life, so that we can protect ourselves as well as the people who are surrounding us in our lives. It is definitely one book which made me think a lot after I finished reading it, and it was definitely a very heavy experience reading this book. But trust me, if you read this book, it will definitely change something in you. After recommending such a heavy book, I want to give you something that is super fluffy and just calm and cozy in its tone. And it is again another YA contemporary, but it is a romance. And this book is I Love You So Mochi by Sarah Kuhn. Now, if you're a person who has read To All the Boys I've Loved Before and its sequels, trust me, you will love this book, because it is so much similar in its tone when it comes to the Lara Jean trilogy. But both of these stories have nothing in common if you ask me. Here we follow Kimmy, who's 17 years old, and she is in the final year of her high school. She had this idea to get into arts college and pursue an art degree because her mother also wanted her to become an artist. But now Kimi is having some change of thoughts, and she is more interested in fashion designing compared to arts, and she wants to get into fashion. Her mother does not agree with it, and during this particular time only, Kimi also gets this opportunity to go to Japan in the small village and get to stay with her grandparents there for a few weeks. Kimi makes use of that opportunity and she goes to Japan and lives with her grandparents there. And again here also she gets to know more about her mother's backstory and her mother's family's history. It is also quite sad when it comes to the backstory, but the whole story as such is just so fluffy and comfortable and happy to read. It also happens in Japan during the Cherry Blossom Festival, so it is even more a beautiful environment and backdrop for the book to be set in. So if you want something just comfortable and fluffy to read, you need to try this one. The next one is an adult standalone fantasy book, and it is The Sword of Kaigen by ML Wang. Now this is a military fantasy in which we follow the small place called Kaigen. And the thing about Kaigen is that it is set up in a modern world, but in a very secluded place where the culture is set in such a way that everything is kind of medieval in its tone, starting from the way in which the men and women work, the kinds of work that they do, and all the other things also. The magic system inside this book is also quite intriguing if you ask me. But most of all, the best part about this book is the spoils of war that is shown by the author to us. Usually in fantasy books, what happens is when there is a war that is approaching, the final chunk of the book usually deals with the war. But in this book, it is not like that. In the first third of the book, we see why the war is going to happen, and the second third we see the war happening, and the last third of the book we see what are all the aftermath of this war and how it has affected the population who are living there. It is definitely a book that is written to show us the atrocity of war and how it affects the lives of people who don't have anything to do with the war at all. It's an extremely character driven book. So if you're someone who wants a lot more story and plot in your books, you might not like this one. But if you're someone who likes good character development, you need to try this. And at last, I want to recommend you another non-fiction, which is actually a collection of real life incidents. And trust me, after seeing the cover of this book itself, you'll want to read it. And it is Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Magic of Dogs by Amy Newmark. Now this is a collection of 101 real-life inspired stories of dogs and how they have helped the people in their lives. The people can be the human beings who are actually taking care of the dogs, or the people who are taking care of dogs in shelters, or any other such people who are associated with taking care of dogs in any way. If you're a dog person like me, trust me, you are someone who needs to read this book, because it will just make you tear up at multiple instances and also make you smile at so many other instances. And the best part about this book is that all these 101 stories have actually happened in the world to people as well as the dogs, and just knowing that itself will melt your heart and even break your heart at times. It is definitely something which is super heartwarming in its tone. And again, this one has the least number of ratings of all the books that I've recommended so far in this video. And if you're a dog lover, you need to try this one, because I'm sure you will love it. So yes guys, those are all the 10 underrated or underhyped books that I wanted to recommend you today. If you have read any of these books, let me know down what you think about them in the comments. And if you have any other such book recommendations, do feel free to comment them also below, so that all of us can get some book recommendations from you. And if you did enjoy watching today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.